Let's dive in. We're taking a look at Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales today. It's the sequel to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, both by Heather Fawcett. In this one, Emily and Wendell, her colleague, are back at it, still digging into fairy folklore. They get in pretty deep this time, head first into the fairy realm, and they uncover some secrets that maybe should have stayed buried. So if you're into cozy fantasy with a little mystery and a dash of, academic intrigue, this deep dive is for you. One thing that really hit me about this book is how it handles the idea of forgotten stories. What do you think? Why do some stories just fade away like that? And is it always a good thing to bring them back?
That's a great question. And it's something that runs through the whole book. It really makes you think about how heavy knowledge can be and what it means to be responsible for uncovering it. Especially Emily, she wrestles with that a lot. That pull between wanting to know everything and the possible consequences of digging up ancient secrets. It's like she's driven by this thirst for knowledge. But the deeper she goes, the more she realizes that some stories maybe should have stayed hidden.
Yeah, it's not just about satisfying her curiosity at that point. It becomes about the ethics of her research.
Okay.
There was this one story that stuck with me about the Merkmen, these creatures that live in the shadows, guarding these forgotten secrets. The way Fawcett connects their story to the destruction of this ancient fairy city, it really drives home the point that stories aren't just entertainment. They can be warnings or even hold a whole community's trauma.
Absolutely. The book does such a cool job of blurring the lines between whimsical folklore and something much deeper. It challenges that simple idea of fairies as these purely good creatures. Instead, we see this world where they can be just as clever and dangerous as they are charming. You see it in the way their magic is shown, too. It's not all sparkles and pixie dust. There's this raw elemental power to it. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Makes you question those classic fairy tale fairies, doesn't it?
It totally flips those childhood ideas upside down. It's like Fawcett wants us to rethink everything we thought we knew about fairies and the realms they live in. Speaking of which, the book gives us an even closer look at that fairy world than the first one did. All these details about fairy politics, hidden courts and ancient deals that control how they interact with humans. What parts of that world building stood out to you?
You know what really got me? Was the sheer amount of detail Fawcett put into making this hidden society feel real. It's not just a setting, it feels like a living, breathing world. With its own rules and customs, like take the Seelie and Unseelie courts. The book goes into their history, their rivalries, and this fragile balance of power between them. And then there's the Wild Hunt, this ancient ritual that's both amazing and terrifying. Fawcett manages to make you feel wonder and fear at the same time.
It's amazing how she balances those two opposite feelings. There's this constant tension between the beauty and the danger of the fairy realm. It keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. You mentioned the Wild Hunt, and that reminds me of something else the review brought up. Slow burn romance. Now, I know that might sound a little out of place in a world of fairies and research, but stick with me. Emily and Wendell's relationship keeps simmering in this book, and it adds a whole other layer to the story. What do you think about how their dynamic adds to the overall narrative?
It's so interesting how their relationship reflects the main themes of the book. You've got Emily, who's all about logic and reason, trying to categorize and understand the fairy world, and then Wendell, who's much more intuitive, maybe even a little chaotic, you could say. It's like their approaches to studying fairies are reflections of their personalities and their growing feelings for each other.
It's like their intellectual back and forth is a form of courtship. They're always challenging each other's ideas, pushing each other to think differently, maybe even showing vulnerabilities they wouldn't show anyone else. It's not your typical love story.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a spark between them that keeps you invested in their journey, both as individuals and as a potential couple.
And that's what makes it so compelling. It's not a side plot. It's woven right into the story, adding this emotional depth and another layer of complexity to the characters.
You're right. Their relationship brings this human element to a story that's so steeped in fairy lore and ancient mysteries. It reminds us that even in these extraordinary adventures, it's the connections we make with other people that really shape our journeys.
I agree completely. Now, we've talked about the whimsical side of the book, but what's really striking is how Fawcett balances that with this sense of creeping dread. The fairy world, as beautiful and alluring as it is, it also has this definite sense of danger. It's like she's always reminding us that there's a price to pay for venturing into the unknown.
That's what elevates it from just lighthearted fantasy, right? The stakes are real, and Emily has to face the consequences of her actions. And that tension, that feeling of unease, is what keeps you hooked.
Exactly. Fawcett doesn't shy away from the darker side of fairy lore. It's a world where wishes can have a terrible price. and deals with fairies rarely end well for humans. That underlying darkness just adds suspense and intrigue. Makes you wonder if Emily's pursuit of knowledge is worth the risks.
Which brings us to the core of it all, the power of stories themselves. What's so captivating about Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales is that it's not just a story about fairies. It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the stories that shape how we see the world, and the consequences of digging too deep into the past.
It challenges the idea that knowing more is always good. Makes us think about the potential harm in unearthing secrets that maybe were meant to stay buried.
It's like she's saying, be careful what you wish for. Some stories are better left untold.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so thought-provoking. It's not just a fun escape into a magical world. It's a reflection on the nature of knowledge, the power of stories, and the responsibility that comes with uncovering secrets from the past.
Well said. It's a book that lingers in your mind even after you finish reading. And I think that's a testament to Fawcett's talent as a storyteller. She creates this world that's both enchanting and unsettling, a world that makes you question your own assumptions about fairies, folklore, and even the nature of storytelling itself.
Yeah, it really makes you think. It's a world that pulls you in with its beauty and then makes you question everything. One thing I found really interesting was how Fawcett uses specific details from folklore and mythology. She doesn't just throw in random creatures or spells. There's a sense of history and authenticity to her world building. It's really impressive.
It's like she really did her research, right? She's clearly immersed herself in the source material. And that shows in the richness of the details. Were there any specific examples that stood out to you?
Well, for example, the way she portrays the Knuckleavi, it's terrifying but also fascinating. In Orkney folklore, it's this grotesque, horse-like creature that brings plague and drought. Fawcett weaves it into the story in a way that's both true to the original lore and adds a new layer of complexity to its role in the fairy world. It's not just some mindless monster, it's a being with its own motivations and a connection to the very essence of the fairy realm.
Oh, I remember that scene. It's so vividly written. You can practically smell the seaweed and feel the chill of its presence. It definitely makes you rethink those charming, whimsical fairy encounters.
Exactly. And then there's the way she uses the green man, this ancient symbol of nature and rebirth. It's not just decoration. It represents a deep connection between the fairy realm and the natural world, a connection that Emily's constantly trying to figure out. It's like she's uncovering the hidden language of nature, but it's a language that can be beautiful and dangerous.
It's almost as if she's suggesting that the fairy realm isn't a separate world at all, but intertwined with our own, woven into the very fabric of nature. We might not see it, but it's there, influencing the world around us in ways we don't fully understand.
That's a great point. I think that gets to the heart of what makes this book so compelling. It's not just about escaping into a fantasy world. It's about recognizing the magic and mystery that exist all around us, even in the everyday things.
And maybe, just maybe, it's about recognizing that some mysteries are better left unsolved.
There's that tension again, that balance between curiosity and caution. I think that resonates with a lot of readers, especially now when we have access to so much information. It makes you question the value of knowledge itself. Is knowing everything always a good thing? Or are there some things we're better off not knowing?
It's a really thought-provoking question, and I think the book handles it really well. It doesn't give easy answers. It just shows how complex the situation is and lets Emily and the reader grapple with it.
And it does it all with such beautiful writing.
Yeah.
Fawcett's prose is so evocative, so immersive. She truly transports you to another world with her descriptions.
Right. The review talked about her lyrical prose. And it's so true. There's a poetry to her writing. It makes you want to savor every sentence.
It's like she's painting a picture with words, creating a tapestry of sensory details that make you feel like you're right there in the story, experiencing everything alongside Emily. Remember that scene where she first enters the hidden fairy market? The way Fawcett describes the sights, the sounds, the smells, it's absolutely captivating.
It's like stepping into a dream, but a dream that's both enchanting and a little bit unsettling. Which brings us back to Emily and Wendell's relationship. I have to admit, their dynamic is one of the things that has me most curious. The review mentioned their intellectual and romantic sparring, and I'm really interested to see how that plays out in this book. What can you tell us about how their relationship progresses without giving too much away?
Well, I think it's safe to say that their relationship deepens in this book. They're forced to rely on each other more than ever as they face the dangers of the fairy realm. And as they spend more time together, they start to see each other in a new light. Emily begins to appreciate Wendell's intuition and his ability to connect with the fairy world in ways she can't. And Wendell starts to see Emily's vulnerability, beneath her scholarly exterior.
So it's not just intellectual sparring anymore. There's a genuine emotional connection developing between them.
Exactly, and it's not always easy. They still have their disagreements, their moments of frustration. But there's an underlying tenderness that wasn't as apparent in the first book. I think Fawcett does a brilliant job of portraying the complexities of their relationship. It's not a simple love story, it's a nuanced exploration of two very different people, learning to appreciate and respect each other's strengths and weaknesses.
It sounds like their relationship is as much about self-discovery as it is about romantic love. They're both learning and growing as individuals, and their relationship is a catalyst for that growth.
That's a great way to put it. And I think it's something that a lot of readers can relate to. We've all had relationships that have challenged us, forced us to confront our own beliefs and assumptions. And sometimes those are the relationships that help us become the best versions of ourselves.
It's like that saying, we don't meet people by accident. They are meant to cross our path for a reason. And I think Emily and Wendell's relationship is a perfect example of that. They're both on these individual journeys, but their paths keep intersecting. And it's clear that they're meant to learn from each other.
Their interactions are always so engaging, whether they're arguing about fairy lore, sharing a quiet moment over tea, or facing a dangerous situation together. You can really feel the chemistry between them, both intellectual and emotional.
And it's not just the main characters that are well developed. The supporting characters also add a lot to the story. I'm thinking specifically of Beryl, Emily's former housemaid, who's now embracing her own magical abilities. She's such a strong, independent character, and her journey provides a fascinating contrast to Emily's.
Absolutely. Beryl's story adds another dimension to the book's exploration of female empowerment and the choices women make in a world that often tries to limit them. She's not afraid to defy expectations and forge her own path, even if it means venturing into the unknown.
It's like she's saying, I'm not going to let society dictate my destiny. I'm going to embrace my power and create my own future. And that's such a powerful message, especially for young women reading this book.
And it's not just Beryl. We also see this theme reflected in the way Emily navigates the male-dominated world of academia. She's constantly having to prove herself, to assert her intelligence and expertise. And she does so with grace, wit, and a fierce determination that's truly inspiring.
She's definitely a role model for anyone who's ever felt underestimated or marginalized. She shows us that it's possible to break down barriers and achieve our dreams, even when facing adversity.
And she does it all while wearing those fabulous boots.
That's right. We can't forget about Emily's signature style. It's a reminder that being brilliant doesn't mean sacrificing your sense of self. You can be a scholar, an adventurer, and a fashion icon all at the same time.
I think that's one of the reasons this book connects with so many readers. It offers a fresh perspective on fantasy, blending traditional elements with modern sensibilities. It's a story that's both familiar and groundbreaking, offering something for everyone.
I totally agree. It's a book that defies categorization. It's cozy fantasy, it's academic intrigue, it's a slow burn romance, it's an exploration of folklore and mythology, and it's a reflection on the power of stories and the choices we make in the pursuit of knowledge. It's a truly remarkable achievement.
And it's a lot of fun to read. I think that's important to remember. Amidst all the serious themes and thought-provoking ideas, there's a sense of whimsy and adventure that makes you want to keep turning the pages. It's a book that reminds us that reading can be both entertaining and intellectually stimulating.
That's what makes it such a rewarding experience. You're not just passively consuming a story. You're actively engaged with the ideas, the characters, the world building. It's a book that stays with you long after you've finished reading it, sparking conversations and inspiring further exploration.
And speaking of exploration, there's another aspect of the book we haven't touched on yet. The way it uses setting to create atmosphere and evoke emotion.
Oh, absolutely. The setting is almost like another character in the story.
Exactly. Fawcett does an incredible job of bringing the landscapes to life. From the snow-covered forests of Jocelyn to the hidden valleys of the faerie realm. Each location has its own unique personality and contributes to the overall mood of the story.
I'm particularly drawn to her descriptions of the fairy realm. They're so vivid and imaginative. You can practically feel the mist on your skin and hear the rustling of leaves beneath your feet.
She captures the otherworldly beauty of the fairy realm perfectly, but she also doesn't shy away from its more unsettling aspects. Remember the scene where Emily and Wendell stumble upon the ruins of an ancient fairy city?
Oh yes, that scene was both breathtaking and eerie. You could sense the weight of history, the echoes of a civilization long gone. It was a powerful reminder that even in a world of magic, time takes its toll.
And that even the most beautiful things can eventually crumble and decay. I think that scene speaks to the book's broader themes of loss and memory. Emily is constantly trying to piece together fragments of the past, to understand what happened and why. And in doing so, she has to confront the fact that some things are irretrievably lost.
It's like she's trying to hold on to fading memories,
Yeah.
to preserve something precious before it disappears completely. And that sense of urgency, that fear of forgetting, it runs through the entire story.
It's a theme that resonates with all of us, I think. We all have memories that we cherish, stories that we want to pass down. And the book reminds us how important it is to preserve those stories, to keep them alive, even as the world around us changes.
It's like she's saying that stories are more than just entertainment. They're a way of connecting with the past, understanding our present, and shaping our future.
Exactly. And Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales is a powerful testament to the enduring power of stories.
It's a book that's full of wonder, mystery, and heart. It's a book that makes you think, feel, and question everything you thought you knew about fairies, folklore, and the very nature of storytelling itself.
It's a book that I highly recommend to anyone looking for a truly immersive and thought-provoking reading experience.
And I couldn't agree more. You know, it's interesting how the book balances these big ideas like history, memory, the power of stories, with the personal journeys of the characters. Emily especially grows a lot in this book. She starts so focused on her research, on putting everything she finds in the fairy realm into neat little boxes. But as the story goes on, she has to face her own limits, her own biases, and in the end, she learns to be more intuitive and compassionate in her work.
It's like a classic hero's journey, you know. She sets out to find knowledge, thinking she can control it all. But then she discovers that to really understand something, you need to be humble and let go of your preconceived notions.
And it's not just about her academic work. Her relationship with Wendell plays a big part in her changing, too. At first, they seem like such an odd couple. You have her, the meticulous scholar, always wanting things in order, and him, the charming rogue, more at ease with chaos and gut feelings. But the more time they spend together, the more they start to influence each other in these unexpected ways.
It's like their differences, which seemed like problems at first, actually become their strengths. They balance each other out, challenge each other to grow.
Emily learns to let go a little, to trust her instincts, to embrace the unexpected. And Wendell starts to see the value in discipline and structure.
Yeah, it's a great example of how relationships can make us more well-rounded. It shows the power of finding someone who challenges you and supports you, someone who helps you see the world differently.
And we can't forget the humor in their relationship. Their banter is so witty and fun, it lightens up the story, even when things are dangerous and uncertain.
Oh, absolutely. Like that scene where they're trying to figure out that old fairy riddle and Wendell keeps throwing out these crazy guesses. Emily's getting so exasperated.
I was laughing out loud at that part. It's a perfect example of how Fawcett balances those serious themes with moments of pure humor and warmth.
It reminds us that even when things are tough, there's always room for laughter and connection, something we all need, especially these days.
Absolutely. We need those lighthearted moments, those reminders that even with all the chaos and uncertainty, there's still beauty and joy to be found. And Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales definitely gives us that. It's a book that's both fun and makes you think, a book that stays with you long after you've finished it.
I completely agree. And for our listeners who are now hopefully intrigued and want to explore this world for themselves, I'd say this: pay attention to the details. Fawcett's writing is so rich and layered. There's always something new to discover every time you read it. And don't be afraid to let your imagination run wild. This is a book that invites you to step into a world of magic and mystery, to explore the hidden parts of your own mind, and to embrace the power of stories to change us.
And as you journey with Emily and Wendell, remember this: the most important discoveries are often the ones we make about ourselves. So what lost stories or forgotten knowledge would you want to rediscover? And what would you be willing to risk to find those secrets? Those are questions worth thinking about. And maybe, like Emily, you'll find the answers not in old books or ruins, but inside yourself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep believing in the magic of stories.